Once upon a time, there was a time I was live from London. Well, from outside London, actually. It's me, and I did threaten you with harmonicas and singing. So, unless you want harmonicas and singing, maybe somebody ought to put some messages up and I can answer them. And yeah, that's it. And I've got to mute that. Whoa! Oh, one day, just one day, I might get this right. You never know. It's it's 8:30 GMT on the 1st, isn't it? Yes, it's the 1st of February 2023, which is quite an interesting date, really, because it's the only one we've got, because tomorrow never comes. And yesterday, we've already had that. Well, we've had all our yesterdays. Used to be a TV show back in the 60s called All Our Yesterdays. Anyway, welcome. Today, I'm going to try and talk about something that's of interest to somebody, even if it's only me. Well, this is the theory. Excuse me. When I look over there, as in like there, that's because I've got two monitors on my computer, because I'm flash like that. My wife bought it for me, so therefore I have it. No, actually, I bought the monitor. She just bought the computer. Right, so we're here. And anybody who is a regular to the channel will know that I released quite an interesting video during the week, which was all about the dragon from Nakamichi and how it was going to deal with the Tudor. Now, the Tudor was a tape that was Tudor, T-U, not C, not chewed as in chowder or chewed up, but Tudor as in the old English monarchy system, I guess. Anyway, yes, the Tudor tape, and it was one that I'd done a review on using my W1200. Now, the thing about the W1200 is, and as I said it in the things, some people think it's pretty good. Some people think it's the biggest load of crap ever made. Some people don't know anything about it, which is obvious from the posts that keep on going on to the Facebook. Vintage cassette decks. Yes, vintage cassette decks. They always... Why do people go onto a vintage cassette deck channel, Facebook forum, whatever, and say, what are you rating on this new deck? Because you know full well that they're going to get told it's crap, because it's too expensive. It's 360 quid in the UK, or it was when I bought mine. And so it's too expensive and it's no good. And then they will go out, those same people will go out and buy a phone like an iPhone, and they'll spend, well, what's an iPhone 13, 14, about £1,300, and it's a phone. And they'll spend, they'll go for a restaurant meal and they'll spend £100 for one meal for two people. And yet 360 quid or thereabouts for a cassette deck is too expensive. I don't understand it. I know that when I was into cassettes the first time round, I went out and bought a cassette deck, which was an Amorex, and it was a lay on it back type thing. It was stereo. It was not particularly well made. It wasn't a particularly good, but it cost me an absolute arm and a leg. And it cost me, I think it was £45 in 1974. And if you were to multiply that price up now, £45 in 1974 was about 500 quid. And it was absolute pants. My brother was impressed with it, though. He went out and bought a Sony and spent a lot more money on his Sony. But because he liked the idea of a stereo cassette deck, he went out and bought one. And that was fine. Anyway, that's that. So anyway, the idea of the I've just confused myself now. Multitasking is not easy when you're live broadcasting. Anyway, what I did then was a friend of the channel sent me the he did all what was necessary to try out a Tudor. and the file that he sent me was fine. It was he used my original file, and so the results they're not decibel for decibel compatible, but they are on the basis that they were set up. They used the same file, produced very similar results because the levels were set up to be correct and the file was just played, and then it was transposed back into digital, and that's what's shown on the actual thing I've done. The video, trying to keep it nice and simple. I didn't get too stuck into how the Gotichi knows. Sorry, I didn't get too stuck into how the differences between the Tiak and the Nakamichi. There are some interesting similarities, which I thought, because it says on it, it's not a test of the deck, so we know what the decks are capable of. The Nakamichi is a wonderful deck, and I won't hear a bad word said about it, other than the fact that it's very expensive, or they were. And the Tiak is a good, well, people keep calling it entry level. It's not entry level. It's got full soft touch remote control. It's got parallel recording. It's got various other things. It's got lots of stuff going for it, which means that it works quite well, and it's nice to live with compared to buying. Wasim, hello Wasim, how you doing? Yeah. Anyway, I'll carry on. Compared to buying a vintage deck and then having to repair it, it just works. But anyway, that's that. And the results, which I thought was quite interesting, was that neither deck could drive the tape particularly hard without a lot of distortion, and neither deck could get it to sing. Now, by singing, I produced. Did anybody like the silly little graphic I produced, a singing cassette? If the answer is no, that's fine, but put it in the comments. The singing cassette was fine as far as I was concerned, but we couldn't get it to sing. The file that was sent to me for the Nakamichi was no more tuneful than the one that the 1200 produced. Obviously, it had high frequency response in it, but it was no more wonderful in terms of you put your headphones on, you listen to it, and you've got ears as old as mine. I wouldn't say it sounded exactly the same, but it was no better. It was slightly different, but it was no better. I've had better sounding versions of the same music because I always use the same file. I've had better sounding versions of that from the tapes that were used, and the BASF that I keep on mentioning BASF, but that's because I've done a lot of tests on them. The BASF that I did the test with, that I said was best, produced a much better result than the Nakamichi, even though the Type 2 response on the 1200 isn't as good as the Nakamichi's Type 1. The other thing was that did anybody take any notes of the noise level? The noise was the tape, not the machines, and that was I thought was quite interesting. And also that funny step in the middle. That funny step in the middle makes it quite obvious that it's the tape. The tape does not like being used. Around about this 14, 15, 16K, there was a funny sort of drop about 12 to 14K and then a rise around 15, 16K. All very strange, but consistent. Hello, Kelvin. Good evening. How you doing? So we've got two regulars today. That's good. And me, I'm regular. But then, so there's a lot of things, and they're not always necessarily good. But there we go. Cheers. It's only Coke, by the way, Diet Coke. Well, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Anyway, Wasim, how'd you get on with your mini disc thing? Any more news? I thought was quite interesting. And Kelvin, how are you doing, sir? In the meantime, I shall wait for something to come up on there. And actually, I could if I type something on there. This is an experiment. Bear with. I want to see how long. If I type something on here and say, something like that. If I hit the go button now, and then I'll tell you how long it takes for it to come up on the screen on there. 1, 2, 3. Ah, it's about a 3-second delay to me. Oh, cheap domestic lager. That sounds like a nice idea. I like a nice lager. Oh, so you're still having problems with the mini disc, and you're having a cuppa. Well, that sounds like a good idea. If I went off and had made myself a cover, it'd be. I was all efficient. My wife went out today. She's gone off to do something far more interesting than listening to me in the background. And I thought, right, must make sure, because she's normally quite good. She just dropped a drink down on me about 10, 15 minutes in. Well, she wasn't going to be here, so I had to get my own drink. Still, that worked. Right, okay. Anybody got anything they'd like to talk about? I've just talked about the kitten and the lion. Oh, sorry, the dragon and the W1200. Yeah, did anybody get that simile? Anyway, and just trying to explain how that worked. That it was actually the tape that was on test, not the machines. Yeah, so you're not really worried about the mini disc as such. Yeah, I've never actually seen a mini disc in person, because they got stomped on by, I think it was the mini disc, got stomped on by the music companies because they didn't like the idea of being able to have digital copies. So I never actually got to see one of those in the flesh. I've got a rather nice little Sony. What is it? It's a mini system. Last week we were talking about Tecmo's video. Quite happy to talk about that. The Amstrad video. And has everybody seen that now? Because I have. Oh, that's strange. You're talking about Audacity. That's the one. Yeah, I can talk you through that if you want. Give us a question and I'll see if I can answer it. And if I can't, maybe somebody else can later on in the comments. But I'll give it a go. What would you like to know? Kelvin says mini disc is underrated by 3 portables and standalone. All right. But carry on, please. No, hang on. Right. Oh, it really is strange. There's this funny guy there. I say funny, weird, and he keeps on copying me, but he's behind me. It's weird. Right. Yes. We're seeing. What would you like to know about Audacity? Because they've changed it a lot recently, which makes it slightly weird. To digitalize a cassette. Right. Well, that's easy. Get yourself a W1200 or Behringer UCA 222 or 202. I think it's UCA. There's a video on my channel about it, and they work very well. I actually use one of those all the time. But to digitalize a cassette, if you've got a cassette and a W1200, all you do literally is plug the USB lead, which is the same type as you have on the back of a printer in the old days. They're all Bluetooth now, I know. But in the old days, you'd have a USB lead on your printer. So it's got I don't know what the number is, but it's the square end going to the flat normal USB jobby. And you plug that straight into your computer. And with the W1200, it even knows that it's stereo, but it's always worth checking, I think. Yeah, you plug it in and then you just open up Audacity and it will just take it in as being, you select that as a sound source. USB-B, I thought it was. I didn't want to make a silly ass of myself, so I just thought I'd just waffle. If in doubt, waffle. Or is that just be awful? No, one or the other. Yeah. So what I do is when I'm doing my Yeah, that's it. While I'm doing my tape tests, I use the Behringer to send the sound to from the computer. I use the Behringer to send the sound to the cassette deck. The cassette deck, I always use the same file, so the levels are always the same. And then, having done that, I then use the W1200's playback function and so I unplug the Behringer, plug in the W1200, and feed the signal in that way. And because the 1200 is not variable on its input, it means that the outputs are always roughly the same. I say roughly the same because what actually happens is, if you look at any of the tape tests I've done, you'll find that some of the BASFs couldn't push more than 0 dB, even though the machine, the computer, was putting out +5. And on the Tudor, I managed to get +3. And on some of the BASFs, like I say, I've got just around about 0. And because I've always done it the same way, I know that the results are good. And the sound quality is excellent. I think Kelvin will probably agree with you there, because I know Kelvin's got a W1200. And it does actually do the job very well. And with Audacity, you can also alter the pitch and the tempo and whatever. But what a lot of people who digitalize cassettes get wrong is, if you're going to feed out a signal, and you have to make sure that you do set up the input levels, well, the sensitivity levels of the Audacity, so that you don't peak more than 0, because it's not analog, and once you hit 0, it just cuts the top off the signal. So if you've got a strong signal like the 1812 or something like that, you have to make sure if you're doing like something like the 1812, you have to make sure that when you're playing it back, that you've got it peaking no more than 0 on the Audacity. But then, as I say, it doesn't really matter with the tests I do, but it is if you're going to start doing different sorts of music. Yes, Kelvin, the pure chromes do seem to be fickle. If you look at the odd one I did, I think it was the third one from the end. Well, it's the pure chromes. They actually did not. Yeah, that's right. The noise floor does make up for the lack of volume. They actually sounded superb. And more than anything else, the noise, because of the way they actually, and you can see it on the traces that I did, the way they actually hit the 0, they didn't go third harmonic. They almost, well, they almost went tube-like. I don't like that expression because I'm English. They almost went like valve, because they didn't clip. If you look at the Tudor, we all know about the Tudor at the moment. If you look at the third harmonic distortion on that, around about the 0 dB, and when it went +2 and +3, the third harmonic and subsequent distortions, so it went all the way up to, I think, about 6 peaks. So I haven't got it. I can't pull it up on here. But when you looked at that, I said in the video, it wasn't a pretty sight. When I did the pure chromes, they were actually very good. They didn't have all the distortion. They just stopped recording at a certain level. There's a good question for you, Kelvin. I always fancied mini disc. Like I say, never actually got to it. I went straight from. I had a problem where I needed to have sound, so I bought a tiny little radio, and that was no good, because where I live, there's hills, and it was FM radio. So half the time it was hissing, half the time it was hissing more. And I ended up going from that to MP3 players. And I always had this, which was quite useful. If you ever want to, I don't know if they still do this model. It's a Olympus, but it's an MP3 recorder. Very good quality, not cheap. I say not cheap. I know Techmoan and even Recordology have got really good MP3 recorders. But that, I think, was about 65 quid about 3 years ago. And but it does do a proper job of recording up to various levels. And it's got filters on it. So, for instance, if you were using it in a vehicle, you can put the you can put the high pass filter on, or the low cut filter, I think they call it, so you don't get all the drumming of the bodywork. But yeah, that's quite good. I was looking the other day. Oh, I know what I was going to say. When I said on the video about the buff ting really sounding good, it did. And I was thinking the other day I might make a video of buff tings, but I think that might be a bit boring. Might not be able to see the point. Sorry. Or the ding. I don't know if anybody realizes the importance of that. On the file, I've got the buff ting, because a ting you can hear wow on, and the buff you can hear the low frequency response, and the sharp edge of the ting, it shows you the high frequency response as a very simple, quick test. I.e., if it sounds horrible on the buff ting, then you know you've got a problem. 660 deck stopped playing today, so I've put this away and got out my Yamaha KX393. Oh wow, you got Yamaha. Yes, it could well be the belts. This is what I was sort of implying earlier on. I've actually got 1, 2, 3. Hang on. I've got the TIAC. I've got the Ion. They're both relatively new. Well, the TIAC is. And then I've got 4 other decks which are old. And you never know if they're going to work. So Kelvin says that the son is good. And the battery seems to last forever. Is there a problem? I think I saw on Techmoan he was saying a problem getting stick batteries or something for some of these devices. Gumstick batteries, like I say, not my field. I got involved in video, and I got involved in automotive. I got involved in TV, RF, CCTV. What else did I do? Digital processing, programming. I ran my own shop, produced my own telephone test equipment, which I sold to BT and others, and I fixed an awful lot of cassette recorders, video cassette recorders, radios, and all that sort of thing. Does anybody understand why there's a problem with digital tuning? There seems to be a thing on the internet at the moment about digital tuning, and yes, that's gumstick batteries. Yes, sometimes you can get modern ones. Yeah, I think there is a source of supply, but you might end up just buying cells or hardwiring something on it. I think Techmo said you can get one of them. You could get sort of a clip-on adapter for one of the Sonys, and you can put normal AAs in it. But I wouldn't guarantee it. But I think that's what I saw. Right, what I was going to say, totally forgotten now. No, oh yes, digital tuning. If you've ever been involved in radio, proper radio, I don't mean listening to Tony Blackburn, although he's a very good DJ. If you've ever been involved in things like CB radio, which is almost proper, and amateur radio, which is definitely proper, you know that digital tuning is a wonderful thing, and it's not to be avoided although it does make for choppy tuning when you're going through the band. But I thought I'd have a look and I'd see what the the information on the internet was about tuning. And one of the reasons that Americans didn't go for UHF TV when it first became available, particularly, apparently, and if you know any different, please put it in the comments. But apparently, they had a lot of problem with getting the tuners to lock up, because obviously UHF is a lot harder to tune, and because of the TVs being basically boxes of valves, tubes, and they glow and they get hot, you'd have to keep on getting up and retuning them, and so they weren't that popular, whereas the VHF tuners were easier to handle. But yeah, that's just an interesting thing. Anybody interested in record players? Ah, I know. Now, I was looking at something the other day, because obviously people like Recordology are quite big on the records. I haven't done much on records, not because I've only got one record player and I've done that, and nobody sent me anything. So if anybody out there wants to send me a record player or something to test and check out, then more than happy to do so. Any manufacturers or any normal people, just emails on the channel information, and we'll see what we can do. But what I was going to say was, a lot of these people who are interested in records and things, they slate the W1200 and various other cassette decks as being rubbish. What they don't seem to realise is, and I looked this up, so I'm not talking rubbish here. I often do, but not this time. The wow and flutter on a entry-level cassette deck, the wow and flutter on the Metaxa and Sins £75,000 tape deck is around about 0.2%. The wow and flutter on the W1200 is about 0.25% or 0.2%. I forget the exact figure now. The wow and flutter on a £200, so we're talking what, $250, a record player, Audio Technica, is about 0.2%. So how can people claim that the wow and flutter on a W1200 or similar, so that would include the ions, which have got a reasonable wow and flutter, I think they specify the same, how can they claim that records are so much better than tapes when they've got the same wow and flutter figures? And then somebody's going to turn around and say, oh, but wow and flutter on records is different to wow and flutter on tapes. And there's possibly some truth in that, but as they use the same frequencies and the same machines to read them, I doubt if that's actually true. I know that one of my cassette decks has got a 0.036% wow and flutter, which is pretty damn good. And I know the Dragon's got. I did read a review. You see, being old, back in 1970 something, when the Nakamichi Tri-Tracer was out, and got a new person, Egil Finneson. BO called 5500. Yes, the Bang & Olufsens are very nice. Yeah. I'll tell you what, I accidentally made, talking about wow and flutter, I made the mistake once of putting on a Facebook group the idea of using a tape to generate your own wow and flutter tape. And whoa, you should have seen I think you've got about 200 replies, most of which were insulting. But I then went on to Tapeheads and saw somebody on there, and he was saying, and he was a respected one there, and he was saying, What's the problem? The worst it's going to be is twice that it is, and if you do it 4 or 5 times, it should all even out, and you could actually get a reasonable result that you can actually quote. Well, I figured if you've got a tape and you do it and you then check it and it comes out at we'll say 0.1 or 0.2%, what's your problem? You know that it's at least that. It's no worse than that. But yeah, really weird. Right, so welcome, Egil, and we'll see. I think they should be keep things. People should keep things. If it sounds good to the listener, i.e., you, that's all you need. Some of the best things I ever watched as a kid were on square TVs and cheap boom boxes. Absolutely. Kelvin, you're talking about on tape heads. No, it wasn't you. But yeah, I don't know who the fact that so many people had have you ever noticed how vehement some of these people are? They can be really nasty. You ask, I've seen people come onto some of the Facebook pages and they say, I've just gone out and spent £100, $100, whatever, on this Sansui, blah, blah, blah. And then they make the stupid mistake and say, what do you guys think? And I think to myself, why on earth? If you're pleased with it, enjoy it. If you're not pleased with it, ask if anybody can help you fix what's wrong with it. But for God's sake, don't ask what people think about it, because it will then be followed by at least 30 comments, of which 15 will say how bad it is, 3 will say how good it is, and the rest of them, I've lost the count of the numbers now, the rest of them will just talk about anything other than that. And then there will normally be somebody who will put on A4 response. And yeah, I don't see the point of that myself. Any other questions? Well, we've been going for just over half an hour now. Anything cheap? Oh, that's what I was going to say about. One of the things I didn't agree with Techmoan's video. I mean, I agreed with 99% of what he said, but the one thing I didn't agree with was when he said that he called it. He said that it was a con. What I have during my life, I've been involved in sales, and what I was told when I went on the sales course was, don't lie. You don't have to tell them everything, but don't lie. Never lie, because if you lie, you'll get caught out. And what I was going to say about that was, when Amstrad sold those very cheap and horrible stereo systems, nobody thought they were anything different, did they? The specifications, as I understand it, were what they said they were. They told you what the frequency response was. They told you what the signal noise ratio was, and you could play with them and you could hear them. They were boxy. They were horrible. I mean, they were really nasty things, but they weren't. How should I say it? They were sold as to what they are, and actually, if you put a decent speaker on them, which would cost more than the actual thing itself, if you put decent speakers on them, they didn't sound that bad. But when you listen to the other stuff, yes, boom, boom. I actually went. I worked for a short period for Everest, the window company, and they said, "This is true." They said, "Why? How do we sell our windows? Because they're more expensive than everybody else's." And they said, "Well, we just don't. We don't run anybody else down. We point out what the differences are, and we tell people what the price is, and then they can make up their own minds." And that's the way I thought. Yeah, that's why I worked for them for 5 years. And yeah, I agreed with that. At the same time, I was working for a shop in Chesham, as it happens, which is no longer there. But I was working for them doing electronics repairs and stuff on a subcon basis. But yeah, it was one of those things where, like for instance, the Everest window doesn't go grey. The Everest window has got steel reinforcement and it's got stainless steel locks. And if you go to a local shop, you'll find that the plastic hasn't got the steel reinforcement, hasn't got blah blah blah. And that's the way we did it. And that's always been my motto. That's why I worked for them for the period of time I did, because I could actually go home at night knowing that I'd been out, done a reasonable job, and I had not actually done any lying or telling of untruths. It was just pure. Anyway, that's the way I did it. It would be nice if certain politicians didn't fiddle their taxes. And what else have they done? Oh, bullying. It seems that if you're a politician nowadays, you can fiddle your taxes, you can bully, and you can lie. But maybe I've just been watching the news wrong. I'm not trying to be political. I just don't like the way that the world has turned recently, and that includes all of the world. There is a lot of weird things going on, which I don't understand why it's happening, and I wouldn't even suggest a cure. But it's just a warning to the world. Pull your fingers out. Start being nice to each other. It would be a good idea. Anyway, let's see. Yes. Good one, Wasim. Yeah, it's always worth being careful about the electrics. Brilliant little playback on the BO chord. And that's what I was going to say, Wasim. The book that Calvin recommended last week, he says is very good, so it probably is. And if genuine offer, if you do want any help with any of the electronics theory or whatever, you can send me an email and I'll try and help out. What I do tend to do, and this is the thing about my channel, I try and keep it simple. For instance, if you stick a transistor and you stick a couple of volts on it and you do whatever, it'll turn into a switch. That's simple. Once you know that, that's all you need to know. But yeah, I remember sitting. I actually had a job in a company called Surio, which I don't know if it still exists in its original form, but they used to make computers for analyzing engines. They were second in the country to Krypton, and they had a big problem when I joined them. Well, that was the big problem. No, when I joined them, they had a problem with the computers were coming in from France and they were programmed in French, which was fun. Trying to translate them into English. That got me involved in a certain amount of programming, ASCII coding, whatever. But the biggest problem they had was that the monitors they were using, they kept on dying. They were only black and white TV modules, and it was well, I walked into this workshop and it was the size of a small shop, I suppose. So there was 3 or 4 benches, and I was the workshop manager. My manager, who was the department manager, sort of said, we've got this problem with these things. And I looked at it and said, well, what's that then? He said, well, they cost, bearing in mind, you could buy a black and white TV, 12-inch, for about 60 quid. These were basically TV drive modules with all that's in it. And they were, I think they were 250 quid to us. So when they went wrong, if we were selling them on, they had a 400% markup. So we're looking at £1,000 for a black and white TV panel. And the trouble with that was that it was, they were just sat there. And there's this box. It was literally a 3 foot deep by, well, it's about the size of a dustbin, and it was full of these boards, and they were all dead. And I said, well, have we got any spares for these? And they said, well, no, not really. You know, there's this just what's there. So I went through that box. It's one of the first things I did. Went through that box, and hey presto, at the end of, I've just gone off. I'll carry on going. At the end of quite a bit of time, I had about 2/3 of them repaired. But the thing was, I was actually a video engineer and TVs, audio, computer, etc., having worked my way up from computer peripherals. And I knew how to repair a TV. But the guys who were already working there, they'd come from sort of like the motor trade and had an interest in electronics and stuff. And they didn't know how to fix a TV. What they knew how to do was they knew how to repair the equipment that we had, which was basically computer stuff, but they didn't know how to repair a television, and they were scared of them. Anyway, that's just a little reminisce. If anybody's got any questions, if they'd like to put some test questions in the comments, I'd appreciate it. I'll get back to you. If there's anything, any of you guys who've joined me tonight, appreciate that, Edul and Wasim and Kelvin, then that's good. I'm going to wrap it up there because there's only so much you can do, and I shall catch you another time. Thanks a lot, guys, and thoughts on mixtapes. Does that mean I'm still putting out then? Does that mean I am? Hello? Yeah. Don't know. Yes, I'm still there. Okay. Right. Mixtapes. What do you mean by mixtapes? Oh, look, I am there. Oh. This is my delay's got bigger. My actual screens went totally blank up this end. So sorry, I apologise for that. I thought I'd gone. Yeah, I love them. You talk, Kelvin, are you talking about making them or buying them? I'll tell you what I bought the other day. I got about 150 tapes off Facebook that somebody was giving them away. And my wife was talking to somebody the other day, and they're going through their parents' house, and they've got, she said, this lady had been recording radio programs for the last sort of 35 years or whatever, just recording them, and she's got loads and loads of cassettes of radio programs. There's one coming away with a package, making and trading in my bag. All right. That sounds interesting. I have to keep an eye open for that. Top 40 on Sundays. Yes. Did you sit there waiting to try and not get? Was that with Fluff Freeman? No, you're not old enough for that. I used to do it with Fluff Freeman, and then Terry Wogan did it, didn't he? And then somebody else did it. But you're trying to get the top 20 or the top 40 without this talking in between and without losing the ends. That was always fun, wasn't it? That's when I discovered the pause button rather than the stop button. You know, a lot of people still don't understand what that's for. That's the button. That is the magic button that allows you to record the top 20 or top 40 without having big gaps in it. Ah, you were doing it the hard way. Did you actually wire it in, or did you use the microphone against the speaker? Because my dad wired it in for me. My dad was an electronic engineer as well. He worked for IBM, and you know, he was all around the world. Worked for the tape department, as it happens, magnetic tapes. Now, there's a story for you. He went to the 1964 World's Fair whilst he was in America learning or teaching them how to use their own tape drives. You know, when you see on films, you got the big boxes and you got the big reels on them, you know, huge, they stand 6 foot tall. They actually used to sit inside them. And that was it. And he actually made because he's into reel to reel, and he made a device so you could split the reel to reel into into quarter-inch, quarter-inch tapes, whatever it is, for the reel-to-reel. I've got to make some mixtapes since I'm back in the vinyl cassette after a break for many years. Yeah, I like a mixtape. I've still got my original mixtapes that I was using in the 1970s, 1980s. One of which has got The Streak, which was out, and I recorded it. I used to buy records, put them straight onto tape. Now I used to listen to the tapes. And when I got slightly older, I had my shoebox recorder in the car, and I wired it into the ignition so that I could actually power it up. And yeah, that was my tape player in a Mini, one of the original Minis with the great big long gear stick. It was sort of like 1959, I think the Mini was, or 1960. It was very, very old when I got it. I got it in 1974. Or was it 75? One or the other. Yeah, 1975, I think it was. So it was old. Cost me, I think I paid an absolute fortune for it. It cost me 35 quid. And then I had to put a new clutch in it. And I wore out a tyre in 2 days because we took the engine out, put a new clutch in, put it back in. Didn't quite line up the wheels properly. And in 2 days, it took a tyre out. So I had to go and get the tracking done. Yeah, it was fine. Yeah, I like making the mixtapes. And so much better than a playlist, isn't it? Because the thing I like about tapes, and I'll tell you this is a secret, the thing I like about tapes is it's too much effort to get up and walk over. In fact, I don't use the remote control on my W1200 because you've got to start faffing around trying to fast forward through things. But if you've made a proper mixtape, or if you've got a good album, you have to listen to the ones that aren't your favourites, and eventually they become your favourites, which is good. And I like quality music. I like the Chicken Song, and I like Life is a Minestrone, and various other things. I think I mentioned that before. Sorry, bit of a repeat. It's like the BBC. Why do people are surprised that there's repeats on the BBC? There's a clue in the name. It's the BB. That's a repeat. Or I'm just being silly now. Anyway, I shall go, chaps, because it's 47 minutes in, and unless anybody's got anything to add. We've seen you used to watch Dallas in the 80s, like the theme tune, and record it onto cassette on TV by putting TV speaker. My old brother screamed the little and it's recorded onto the tape. Have you still got that? Because that's probably worth something now in terms of a family history. We used to do recordings. Like when relatives. I've got an audio recording of some relatives that came from Australia, and they came over to see us, and we recorded them for about half an hour. That was before camcorders and smartphones. But yeah, I've yet to find it. I've got some stuff upstairs. My daughter, she's 38 now, so she was about 4 at the time. So that's old, and she's just talking and singing. It's lovely though. But I've digitalized that one, so I've got a digital file of it somewhere. That's the only thing I can say about digitalizing cassettes. You were asking about it earlier on. I would suggest, and this is just as a theory, and if anybody's got anything else to say about it, then please do put it in the comments. But I cannot see the point in digitalizing, we'll say, Abbey Road cassette, unless it's got some sort of like special thing where halfway through I Am the Walrus, your little brother did something and mangled the tape, and you've repaired it, and it means something to you. My wife's got a record, and she put it on. I think it was a Barbra Streisand record, and she said there's a scratch on that record which happened, and she told me how the scratch happened, and it was a sentimentality to it. So on this particular track, it's Barbara's singing, and it's sort of scattered memories, tick, all the way we used to tick, be tick, and that tick means something to my wife, and it's that sort of thing's magic. But actually, I can't see the point in getting Pink Floyd's whatever it is, Dark Side of the Moon, and digitalizing that from a tape, because you're not now using the tape, and the sound quality, to be honest, would be better on a CD. That's not to say that I don't like the sound quality of tapes. I like to listen to tapes, but I can't see any point in recording a tape onto digits, except for all the stuff that I've got of the kids and my mum and dad and these relatives and things, and that's absolute magic. And I believe I did actually buy a few years ago. I bought a reel-to-reel, an Akai reel-to-reel, and I recorded some stuff that my dad had done. And I've got a recording of him talking to a guy in America on the telephone, only because I don't have much of my dad. He died when I was quite young. Well, no, I was quite old. He died 35 years ago, but just about 2 months before. No, it's not one of those, unfortunately. It's older than that. It's got valves in it, but it does do 2 speeds and a sleeve. I shall have to pull it out and do a review on it, but it's hidden somewhere. Yeah, the tape was something my mum found before she died. But he died 6 months before I got married, and apart from some cine film of him, I don't have very much of audio of him. But I did have these tapes, because one of my earliest memories, and this is how electronics can be soppy. I remember living in a house which we lived in until I was 3. So we were in this house, and I must have been around about 3. My dad had a reel-to-reel tape recorder. Apparently, it was quite expensive at the time. My mum was playing some tapes, and she didn't like. Well, no, she didn't realise how important it was to stop the tape. So somebody came at the door and knocked on the door, and so we're talking about 1961-ish. Yeah. Somebody came and knocked on the door, and she went off to answer the door. And in those days, people used to chat, and the reel-to-reel, the tape ran out, and it was playing something probably like Gene Krupa or something like that. But it was quite good music. I remember that. And of course, the take-up reel started spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning. It got faster and faster and faster, and it was destroying the end of the tape, which is why I remember it was quite traumatic, because this thing was flapping around making a noise like I don't know what. And I remember when my dad got home, he was rather annoyed. He was very good about it, but this was his pride and joy. And apparently, because it had knobs, but so you put it on the spindle, the blind spindle, and then you put the knobs down, and the spindle had a little spike. So you had the star type thing, and you had to line it up with the spike. And what my mum did, because she was my mum, she put it down, and then she rotated it under pressure until it located in the hole, and then she did the little knob thing up, which you'd think was fine, except that the little lug was very sharp. So all my dad's reels then had gouges out at the bottom, which she wasn't over impressed with, and then she destroyed the end of this tape. So I think he asked her nicely not to do it again. I remember she was a little bit, she wasn't that keen on using the tape player again. But it was one of those interesting things. And in those days, you couldn't buy very much stuff that was particularly. I've got that. My brother's got that reel-to-reel. He asked me if I wanted it, and I said yes. It's a full tubes, obviously, 1950 something, and my dad actually got the capstan machined down, and the sleeve made, so that it could actually be used for 2 speeds. And then he got a switch put on the side. So somehow he managed to switch the motor for 2. So it's actually got an 8-speed reel-to-reel, rather than just being a 2-speed reel-to-reel. 8-speed? No, it must be 4-speed. Yeah, 4 speeds instead. Yeah, that's the sort of thing. That's the sort of thing that memories are made of, isn't it? And I'm sure other people have got stuff similar. And if you'd like to put it in the comments, then fine, that's great. Like your brother shouting over your top 40 recordings. And yeah, I'll tell you one what was quite an interesting one. Have you ever had audio shock? I have. My dad and I, back in 1960 something, when Radio 2 was first going stereo, and my dad had bought me a Fidelity radio. It was about the size of an A5 book, but it's thick. It was FM AM radio, and it was really good. And I said to him, and this is how my brain worked, and his obviously worked similarly. I said to him, "Okay, so the transmitting stereo, it's on FM. Why can't we have?" You trained your 3-year-old. Happy days, yes. Phone drone, yeah. I know this. These phones are a terrible thing, in a nice way, but they're terrible. Anyway, just back to the thing. FM. I said to my dad, if they're transmitting FM stereo, if we got an FM stereo decoder, could we actually just do the FM stereo? And he said, yeah, I think so. So we bought a phase lock loop decoder chip and built the little decoder board. My dad knew a guy who was into radios, proper radios, and he knew which capacitor to remove, which was called the de-emphasis on the FM. And we took the signal out from the FM demodulator straight out without de-emphasizing it, fed that into the phase lock loop decoder, and then drove crystal. Anybody know what a crystal headset is? Not crystal, high impedance, the sort of thing they used in the war. Headphones looked a bit like that, except they were really hard, like telephone receivers. And you put them on your ears, and they were high impedance. They could be driven to give sound from a line output. So we had the line output on there, and listened to the radio on it in stereo, and then later on modified a car radio so that we could put the signal into it like external, an aux input, as it seems to be called nowadays, and drilled a hole in the side of the portable radio so we could plug the car radio aerial into it, and that was the stereo radio we used in the car for about 4 or 5 years. Wonderful device. Never had a reel-to-reel. Egil. Reel-to-reels are good. I like reel-to-reels. When I got the one for doing my dad's old tapes, I did think about sort of getting into reel-to-reel, but they're very expensive. And they take up a lot of room, and I've only got a little house, which is not so good. And so that's why I've stuck with cassette. But reel-to-reel is really nice. If you've seen Recordology talking about reel-to-reel, he expresses it much better than I do, because he gushes over it, and I'm not very good at gushing. But I was sat there watching his video about the reel-to-reel, and I thought, yeah, that's the way I felt about it. It really was nice. But if you've seen the Techmoan video on reel-to-reel, the most expensive format ever, the tapes are very expensive to buy. Yeah, Kelvin. Yeah, I'm glad you agree. That's exactly what I thought. But they really were a good thing. I had a customer when I had my shop, and he came in and said, I want to be able to switch all my hi-fi equipment. And I said, yeah, okay, fine. What do you want to do? And he had several things, and I made him a switch box, and he said, well, can you come and fit it for me? So you couldn't buy them in those days. Well, you could, but they were hugely expensive, and you had to know where to get them from. So I made this switch box, so various sources could be switched, and I went around and set it up for him. And he had the 4000D, and yes, it was a very nice thing, and it sounded really, really good. But yeah, I would like one, but then I'd like so much stuff, and I haven't got the room. If you saw what I've got upstairs, I mean, I bought one of the first CD players. 1982. They've been out for about 6 months. I don't know. I think it was 82. Anyway, within 6 months of them coming out, I had bought one with twin DACs because I knew that the single DAC wasn't a good idea. And, but none of this overclocking and stuff. And I think it still works. In fact, I think it's up in my bedroom. But I say think because we've got this room that we've sort of put stuff in, and amongst it is a reel-to-reel. And I'd like to find out what's in there one day. But I did give it originally to my son. Could you imagine this? Now, this is heartbreaking. When I was working at a place in, I was the workshop manager in a video hi-fi shop. And it was top-end stuff. So we were doing the Bang & Olufsen TVs and BO cords and stuff like that. And, yeah, it was a place called Plaza Marlow, actually. And I was in there and we had really good high-quality Grundig stuff in that. I say good high-quality in Grundig. Not necessarily that should be a sentence, but we did the Toshiba and stuff. And one day I came in and there was this pile of video recorders. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. About 12 video recorders. The shelf, you've seen it on YouTube, where people accidentally pull over on a shelf. Well, over the weekend, this shelf with about 12 video recorders had decided that it wasn't going to be a shelf anymore, and it dropped them all. And these were all high quality video recorders, hi-fi sound, that sort of thing. And it was quite amazing and soul destroying. So they had to claim on the insurance for it. And I managed to pick a couple of them up and get them working. I mean, they were bent and battered. They weren't capable of being sold, but we couldn't use them for spares. So they said, well, you know, what doesn't go in the bin you can keep. And so my son ended up with a rather nice Ferguson. It had one of these. Instead of putting the cassette in like that, you put it in like that. It was a hi-fi stereo VHS, which he was more than happy with because he was only about 12, 13 at the time. And it was great. But VHS hi-fi has been having a bit of a resurgence at the moment. Chrome cassettes, are they in production anyway? I did hear. No, pure chromes are not due to environmental yet, that's right. But I did hear that somebody's making Type 2s and TIAC are selling them. Yes, I think the EV market will take the cobalt mine first. Have you seen this? Talking about EVs, have you seen this thing now where half the towns in the UK have got these ultra low emission zone areas? Bath, Leicester, Manchester. If you've got a car that is, we've got a 2013 car and spent a lot of money on it, and we're not allowed to drive into these towns anymore without having to pay £12.50 to get in. I don't understand how this is going to help emissions, because if you can't afford if you live where I am, which Kelvin's sort of aware of the area, but basically on the outskirts of London, we're on the end of the tube, but the bus service finishes at 8:30 at night, and that's going one way or the other. And how do you actually afford a car that costs £35,000, and even the hybrids are 28, that sort of thing. So Manchester's under review. Well, let's hope. I've heard that a couple of them are trying to stop it happening. Don't get me wrong. I don't think that breathing polluted air is a good idea, but I don't think that doing the ULEZ is a good thing either, because if you can't afford the heating and you can't afford the food, well, I suppose If you can't afford those two, you can't afford a car. But but the thing is, with this ULEZ type thing, you can't. You've got the car. I can't afford to buy a new one. I can't afford to buy an electric one. If what do we do? If they had decent, if I lived in Wembley, I wouldn't worry about a car. If I lived anywhere that sort of area, because they've got a reasonable bus service. But our bus service it's 4 times an hour during the day. About 6 o'clock it goes to half hour, and the last one's at 8:30. So you can't even go to the pictures. If you've got a job, a 9 to 5 job, you're lucky to get home. If you want to go to Aylesbury from Chesham, I think there's a bus once a week, or there used to be last time I looked, which is, it's just not fair. So, and Oxford's going to have a ULEZ as well, but it's just not fair. I think they ought to rethink that, and maybe they ought to retrofit engines with the proper emissions controls. I'm pretty sure my 2013 diesel is not as bad as they are saying it is. I'm pretty sure that the 2015 version isn't any much different, and I'm pretty sure that it would be cheaper to put a decent particulate filter on it, just to get it down to, or whatever the they ought to offer the retrofit. Is all I'm saying. Don't want to get political as such, but I'm just wondering how people are going to be able to work and live if they can't. There's a thing on the other day. A guy was saying, how's he going to be able to charge people 30 quid to fix their taps when it's going to cost him £12.50 in congestion charge to get to them? Well, again, the poor people having to pay more. I don't understand it. Right, anyway. Sorry, conspiracy theorists love the 15-minute neighborhoods. Yeah. I just thought I'd just be a little bit controversial. Damien Leguzanamon. Okay. Subtitles in Espanol, sadly. No, there's no subtitles in Spanish unless it does it automatically. I don't know how that would work, but Damien Leguzamon. I'm not into Spanish. I can do French. What's hello in Spanish? I should know. Yes, but I don't. I know bonjour, and I know hola. Yes, that sounds about right. Hello to Spain. Hello to everybody around the world. This is actually getting quite good. I'm quite excited about this. I know I'm rabbiting on and whatever, but according to my screen, I've got 5 people on now. No one of them's me, but if I turn me off, I wonder if I disappear. It's weird. Anyway, actually, I will call it a day there, because we're now looking at it's gone 9:30. I'm looking at various clocks here, 21:30. Okay. And I would say thank you to everybody who's come along. I really do appreciate it. I really do appreciate the support for the channel, and I hope I can get the channel to grow some more. If anybody's got any ideas on videos they'd like to have done, please do send me a message or put it in the comments. And please try and tell your friends and anybody else who is around to come and join in. Yes. Good night, Kelvin. Thank you very much. I appreciate your support. Thank you. And Wasim, that's good. Thank you very much, Wasim. Really appreciate you coming. And Egil. So that's it. And Damien Leguizamon, thank you very much. Sorry there aren't any Spanish subtitles, but I'll tell you what, if you come in next week, I will try and find some phrases so that I can actually respond to you, or I'll find an auto translation app or something. So thank you very much, everybody, and have a nice time. Stay safe and I shall hopefully see you all next week. And anybody else who's watching the replay, please put stuff in the buenas noches. That's the one. Good night. Yes. Anybody who's watching the replay, please put stuff in the comments as well, and maybe you can come in live next week. I shall catch you again another time. Thank you very much, chaps, and stay safe. Bye-bye.